If you've been listening to the podcast, you know, but I have specific recommendations for each product and service. Many of you have been coming to me saying that you are thinking about transitioning from your current learning platform and you're looking for a new one. And you're asking, what do you recommend? My recommendation is EduFlow, and I'm going to tell you why. To me, this is the first platform I've used where I felt like instructional designers had a say as far as for how it was going to be designed. The focus to me really is on the learning experience, and I can tell that the people behind this are passionate about this entire process. Not only that, but it's simple to build on. It's not going to take you all day and night in order to try to upload your course and to upload all the necessary different types of pieces of content. And best of all, they have a fantastic team to support you, so you're not doing this alone. You don't just have to take my word for it. This platform can be used by both corporate and for higher ed, and you can see that from their past customers like Google and Stanford. Go into today's show notes to use my link that's going to save you 10% off of your subscription. And by all means, if you have any questions about the platform, please feel free to connect with me and to let me know. I have been using EduFlow now for feels like months at this point in time, so I can definitely answer any questions that you may have. And of course, if it's way over my head, if it's too technical for some reason, I can make sure to connect you over with the right people to have your questions answered. So be sure to check them out. Tell them I sent you. And now let's start the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome on into your fabulous instructional design podcast. My name is Dr. Luke Hobson. I'm the Senior ID and PM at MIT. I also produce quite a bit of content on the internet about instructional design, with courses, a blog, a podcast, a YouTube channel, and I recently wrote an ebook called What I Wish I Knew Before Becoming an Instructional Designer. I create so much instructional design content because I feel that it is my purpose to help you with making the online learning experience incredible for you and for your students. And you can find all my information over at drlukehobson.com. Today's episode is a special one because we have an amazing guest who is going to be talking about two relevant topics in instructional design land. The first is Camtasia. It's the signature video editing tool that instructional designers use and that employers are looking for. We talk all about how to develop your skills with this tool and how to impress potential employers. Our second topic is voice acting. I have seen so many postings about voiceover work lately in the instructional design community, and yet I know nothing about it. I didn't know how people got into this line of work or how they found the opportunities to showcase their skill. So luckily for us, Alex Mitz is an expert in both areas, and he shares with us all of his tips. You'll hear about how a former teacher became an instructional designer and now does voice acting for Netflix. It's a crazy story, and I know you're going to get a ton out of this episode. If you love this episode, by the way, be sure to give the podcast a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening by the time you finish the episode. All right, I won't take up any more time. Here is the one and only Alex Mitz. Alex, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It sounds so awesome to hear someone else with an even better microphone than me. So this is going to be a fun, as you make the face, you're like, I don't know. No, I think so. Whatever microphone you're using sounds fantastic. So this is going to be potentially, I think, the highest quality audio podcast to date. I think we're in the running for that one up to this point in time, and you're going to be episode 35. So you know what? I think that's pretty good.
I'm honored.
Exactly. So, Alex, for the folks at home, can you just please introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit more about who you are and what it is that you do.
Yeah, my name is Alex Mitz. I live in Bakersfield, California. I am an instructional designer for higher ed. I also do freelance instructional design and multimedia development on the side, and I also do freelance voiceover work on the side.
You sure do. And we're going to be talking about all those things because I have many questions for you. This is just as much. I know that folks are going to get a lot out of this for everything for the podcast content, but I am also completely in the dark with a lot of your expertise. So I am so curious to learn from you from everything we're going to be talking about today. But one thing I actually have no idea about, Alex, is how you fell into the instructional design field. Because I feel like every person in our field didn't really assume this was going to become their career. And then magically, it kind of happens. So, what's your story? How did you become an instructional designer?
Oh man, yeah, that's kind of funny. So like, I ended up getting my teaching credential after a long stint of like waiting tables and tending bar, and I ended up teaching in a rural city in California, Lamont, California. And a few years go by, but as I'm a new teacher, people sort of catch wind that I'm tech savvy. So they're like, "Oh, do you want to teach this computer elective?" And, "Oh, hey, we're getting Chromebooks and iPads in the classroom. Do you know how to use these things?" Because that was the whole, for teachers, that was the whole thing. It's like, oh, we have all this technology now. It's like, okay, what do we do with it? And administration just gives you a big thumbs up and goes, figure it out. And so, I was there for when the infrastructure was being built and like Wi-Fi, the bandwidth was limited and you would get like internet outages because too many people were, it was nuts. However, I was kind of the person with one eye leading the blind. And so that led to a lot of really interesting opportunities in educational technology. And so I took that as a cue to go get my master's in educational technology. And with that, while I was in the master's program, I actually landed the job that I wanted by going to get the master's. Like I thought I was going to go get the master's and then get the job, but the fact that I was enrolled in the master's got me the job. So in another city just north of my hometown, a former teacher in my old district asked, "Hey, we have this opening for instructional technology coach or, ed tech expert, teacher on special assignment." They have a trillion different titles for it. And she kind of gave me the whole, "Do you know anybody?" Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And I went, "Oh yeah, Cheryl would be good for this. Lupita would be good for this." She's like, "No, dummy, you should apply for this job." And so I applied for the job and I head out to McFarland, California, which the movie is same place. And so I'm out there, and that's kind of what I'm doing for a couple of years. And it's basically instructional design. It's basically higher ed instructional design at the K-12 level. Like you solve a lot of tech problems and show people how to use tools to teach their students better and sort of shore up those weak points in your district. And so I was in love with it. For the first year, I just was rocking and rolling. I was on cloud nine. Couldn't have been happier. And then the second year rolled around and there was some district superintendent changes. And then I was able to do my job less and less. Like they were starting to do things like, reassign me to this for the day or reassign me to go sub in a classroom for a day. And then I ended up being thrown in as like as an interim vice principal for a couple of months. And it was like, this is not the job. So I left. And I thought, I was like, okay, cool. There's a district in town, so I don't have to drive 20 minutes somewhere else. That has a really good, like, sort of forward-thinking educational technology mindset. Maybe I'll get in there. I'll go back and teach English for however long and sort of break into the sphere of educational technology there and move up and be a decision maker or go back to that same sort of role in that district. That'd be really cool. And I got there and I realized that the grass looked really green from where I was. And however, that was just that was 2019-ish. So it was right, but it was the school year that COVID happened. So it was, the August before the March that we all went home. And so I got in and, I loved my site. Like my teachers were cool. My principal and VP were just amazing. But all sorts of things that year happened that just really soured my teaching experience. And that kind of turned me on to the fact that, you know what? As much as I love teaching and as much as I love communicating knowledge and getting people to do things that they couldn't do before and sharing my expertise via pedagogy, maybe K-12 teaching isn't for me because it wasn't the kids. It wasn't the job when I got to do the job. It was all the other stuff. It was like district level admin stuff or, trying to break into that technology sphere. And it was like super well guarded and you could see them making decisions that you didn't agree with. And, and I say it's not the kids, but however, there is a component of like child management times 34 that really is just draining because, you think you sign up to teach English and then you basically sign up to be, a kid mentor to 34 kids while trying not to. Anyway, that's the long and the short of it is I don't think teaching ended up being for me. And, we got hit with a ransomware attack. And so that like forced all of our devices off the Wi-Fi. So I had to use, and they gave us like Chromebooks to teach rather than like teacher computers or like letting us use our personal devices. And then COVID happened, and then we had to do the whole distance learning thing. And I'm just like, I can't. I just can't. I just can't. I can't do it anymore. I got to figure something out. Like maybe something. And so then I did the whole research of like, what do you do with a master's in educational technology? And thank goodness I stumbled upon Matt Sestata's article about like what teachers do after they decide they don't want to be teachers anymore. And his whole bit was instructional design and how being a classroom teacher allows you to do that kind of thing. And so, I'd been applying for instructional design positions before I, threw my hands up and said I'm done. For a while now, I'd been getting my feelers out. I applied to the college that I work at now and I didn't get a call back type of thing, and applied to a couple of other places. It just didn't quite pan out. I almost worked for a place in San Francisco that was really cool, but I wasn't able to move just yet. So it was like, okay, what do I do? Pandemic, distance learning, yada, yada, yada. And then all of a sudden, I get a phone call, and it's from the college, CSU Bakersfield, for those who are listening in California. Hey, do you remember applying for this job 9 months ago? And when I do remember applying for this job 9 months ago, they go, hey, do you want to interview for it? I went, sure, I'll interview for this job. Why not? It was like in May too. So like the school year had like just ended, and it was like the perfect time to go interview for this job. And so I was like, yeah, I'll go interview for that. And so, the backstory being that there's historically always been two, and then one guy left, and my current partner had been alone for 9 months. And then the pandemic happened, and they're like, oh, we should probably fill this position after 9 months. And so they called me and they go, yeah, let's set up an interview via Zoom. And so I hop on Zoom, I present, how I teach and what I do and talk about my background very much like this. And a couple of days later, it was like either a day or 2 days later, I get a phone call. They go, yeah, you're the guy. I went, awesome, cool. So, your terms coming up in fall, like, do you want me to start in August? You're like, no, Monday. I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I call up my principal and I'm like, hey man, this is happening. And he goes, nah, dude, I get it. Like, I knew I wasn't going to hang on to you for long. So thanks for being here. Do your thing. Your duties are good. Just send your resignation letter to so-and-so at the office and you're good to go, man. So thanks. And I'm like, cool. As a parting gift, please have the mini fridge I left in my classroom. And so whoever's next got a really kick-ass mini fridge. It's like, it's huge. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But I jump on and, everyone's going online. And so it's me and my partner just burning through emails and Zoom calls and creating trainings and going nuts. And so that's kind of how I've broken in, and using that and not having to like monger kids, second to second, minute to minute. I've used a little bit of that downtime to pick up some other projects. So like some freelance multimedia and freelance e-learning stuff, and, really throw myself into the voiceover thing. So it's like, project, breathe. All right, cool. Let's work on this other thing, Oh, cool. Emails are coming back in. And I've been able to do like multimedia stuff for the college and voiceover work for the college. So they're just totally cool with, as long as my job gets done and as long as they get everything they need from me, I kind of get to just do all the things I do. And it's awesome. And I love it. And that's how I got there.
It is. That's kind of like what I do as well too. Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. As long as you do your stuff, like, cool, keep on going. It looks good at the end of the day for everyone if you do well. I'm like, yeah, got it. I'll keep doing the thing. Yeah. So I totally understand. You mentioned one part though that was, of course, so early in the story, but I have to ask because I know that some people have had to make this decision. You got the job, but you didn't finish the degree yet. But did you ever have any doubts of like, should I just stop because I already have it and I'll maybe finish it later? Because like some people get trapped in that ABD world. And that's what I'm thinking about, is that they got the job, they were going for the doctorate, and then like, hey, I'll just let it fall by the wayside. Maybe I'll finish it. And like 90% of the population doesn't.
Oh, dude, so I've 100% had those thoughts. And there are actually two sides to this story. So number one, I mentioned in that story too that I was an interim vice principal for a while. And when I say a while, it was like 6 months with no additional pay, which sucked. And so, but I kind of got the unofficial wink, wink, nudge, nudge from the person who was going to be the superintendent. Like, hey man, like enroll in a program. maybe we can get you on as like an intern administrator type of thing, like that. And then, you do this for 6 months, we get you in the next year. And that did not happen. Like that was a bold-faced lie. So I enrolled in the program, like I enrolled in the administrative program. And this was before instructional design was really on the table or, a real possibility. So I finished that program. So I now have a preliminary administrative credential, which means if I want to, I can go be a vice principal anywhere I want to. However, that is not a thing that I really want to do. It was a thing that I thought I was going to do, and that's why I went and got it. So that was kind of a colossal waste of money. It's a nice resume star showing people that I have leadership skills, but that's a really expensive resume star. However, going back to the educational technology masters, from what I understand, from what my partner told me, it was like, yeah, it was down to you and one other guy, and he works here at the college. And if you've ever been privy to a hiring process, if a guy works or if a person works in the company and there is a position to move, they usually just go with that person in the company. But I beat that guy out because I had the masters and he didn't. So that's the double edged sort of that story is that preliminary administrative credential is probably not going to do me any good. I say probably because I have no idea what life holds. Like there's so many things in the past like 2 years that have just taken my life. I just don't expect things anymore. I just ride it like the wind. So maybe it's a colossal waste of money. Maybe it'll serve me well, but that master's did serve me well. Not saying that everyone should go get a master's, but if you're on the fence and you're close to finishing, I would urge you to finish just in case.
It makes a lot of sense. And Dr. Carl Kopp, when he came on the show, he basically said exactly what you just said, that in an interview situation, if you have candidate A and candidate B, if one person has the master's, most likely that's the person who's going to edge the other one out because of that time in school. So that's kind of good to know for reinforcing that one. So now I want to dive more into the weeds of instructional design with really something that, to me, you are the person when I'm thinking about who is the go-to person that I know of for any questions around Camtasia. Congratulations, that's you. You have become
Dude, that is the most flattering thing I have heard in a while. That's amazing. That's awesome.
You have become my guy. Whenever somebody says I have questions about this, I am always admitting I'm like, I am not the knowledgeable one here. I know other people though who know more than I do, and that's why I'm just really glad when you said you come on the show, because I this is just something that I have used competitor software. I've dabbled, but in my day to day, it's not a part of my typical task. So it's really not something that I need to really do. But there's a lot of people out there right now who are either new to instructional design or their job has changed, or as you mentioned, a teacher transitioning over into this field. And Camtasia is like that hot topic. Everyone says, like, how do I use this? I know that this is going to be a part of my daily routine. So can you just do like a little quick overview as far as for what is Camtasia and what can it actually do?
Yeah, Camtasia is like just really simply a video editor. A la Final Cut, a la Premiere Pro, but it's really more designed for learning and teaching. So like that's kind of why Camtasia has become the instructional design, shark repellent in the bat utility belt. Is like it's got all the things in it to make learning easy, and it has all the things in it to make a video editor happy in terms of like, oh, I need this thing, because in like Premiere you'd have to like construct it from the ground up, but in Camtasia it's like, oh, you need to do this is like a function that's just built in conveniently. So that's what that is. It's a video editor at its source, but for anyone who teaches anyone how to do anything, it is choice, chef's kiss good.
And you were not wrong, because I use Adobe Premiere and After Effects for making my YouTube videos, and it took me so long, but I've always used Adobe. So to me, there was like, this is a natural fit. I have a background in graphic design. I should just go and use Adobe and keep on sticking with Creative Suite. And then, did not realize how hard that was going to be. So that was fun. So then you have figured out you're going to be using Camtasia. How did you learn how to use this? What steps did you take to teach yourself?
Yeah. So that actually goes back to the classroom days. When I was an English teacher in Lamont, and I kind of became the tech guy in my district. I can't remember what I stumbled upon, but I was just doing like research like you do, just about your job. Another one of those things that I assume people do, but I do a lot of it. And so I ended up coming across a concept at the time that was kind of new called the flipped classroom. I was like, I don't know what the flipped classroom is. This sounds kind of cool. And, I learned about the idea of like distance learning, the flipped classroom, basically where you send the lecture home for homework, as a video. And then in class, you, the expert, get to help students with their projects. And I'm like, that sounds awesome. That sounds great. Because, yeah, showing 30 students at a time how to write an essay on a whiteboard is about as thrilling as it sounds. So I was like, let's do this whole flipped classroom thing. But then, that didn't work out because it's like, well, wait a minute. I'm in a rural community and not everyone has access to internet at home or devices. So what do you do? And another concept is like, well, if you can't do the flipped classroom, do the blended classroom. And so the idea being that you basically just blend those two ideas. You record the lecture material in a video form, sit them all in front of devices with headphones. And so like if somebody misses something you say, they can just rewind it and not disrupt the other 32 kids in your classroom. Or the kids who want to move faster can move faster. The kids in the middle of that bell curve will move at the rate you think they do, but it sort of clones yourself 32 times. And if someone has a question, they can stop and get you without disrupting other kids. And so I was like, oh, this is awesome. So that's really kind of when I threw myself into it. I'm like, well, what kind of stuff is out there that I can use? And I just stumbled upon Camtasia on a Google search in 2015, 2016-ish. And I bought it and I did that. And it was mind blowing to see students doing stuff. Like I know that's, for non-teachers, that's getting kids to write is hard. And so then when I went from like maybe a 50%, 60% turn-in rate, when I would just traditionally try and teach kids how to write all at the same time synchronously, to like a 95% completion rate with good results, because I could like record the tutorial and edit it as I wanted it to, and they could stop and then go do the section of the essay they were doing and then come back and watch the next part and then go do the next section. It was really cool. And so that just became my way to practice. Is I had a reason to learn, oh, this is how Camtasia does this, and I could see this fitting into my lesson here. Or, oh, there's a really neat feature, and I'll definitely throw this into this type of lesson that I can teach my kids how to do. So that was how I started, and I've used Camtasia probably every day since 2015, 2016.
Now, what have you done since then? Because I've seen a few of your projects online, and they've been really cool. So, like, what are you currently doing right now in 2021 with Camtasia?
So right now it's a lot of responding to faculty. So like faculty write me with problems all the time. And usually when they write an email to me, it's an email with like 6 questions rolled into one email. And so I'll basically unpack it. And what I'll do is like on the administrative side, I'll go into their course and be like, hey, here's your thing. And then I can like highlight it or annotate something, or, do like click effects. Like here's where I'm clicking, click ripple effect, so they know exactly where to go. I can slow things down for them. I can crop parts of video. I can blur things out. I'm just going over a features list, but that's kind of what I'm doing, is recording tutorials for my faculty to get them to do the things they need to do to be successful teaching online.
Well, actually, that's a perfect segue into my next question, because I know that for a lot of people right now, when they are interviewing, you can see when you apply to a job and the job posting itself, usually it calls out what tool it is. And sometimes, unfortunately, some job postings list out literally every single tool under the sun. And you're like, why? And a lot of them are actually competitors of each other. So it's just kind of, it's just kind of silly. But for Camtasia specifically, if someone is trying to dive more into there and they want to build up their chops, what features specifically should they be working on, so that way when they're in an interview and they're actually talking about how they use Camtasia, what are the things that someone's actually looking to hear? You mentioned the Ripple tool and a few other things too. Like what features should someone actually talk about?
That's a good question. I don't know if it necessarily boils down to features as much as it does intent. Because, like as instructional designers, like our job is to help knowledge move from one brain to another. And so like, I find that I have features that I use over and over again. So like zoom and pan is generally something that I use a lot, is like zoom into a thing they need to see and focus on, or pan to like follow the mouse across the screen, or like fade from one clip to another. So like those are ones that I use pretty much over and over again. But I think if it were in an interview process, like that would be the answer I would give. I'd be like, I would say, features you can learn. Like I can read the documentation and learn how the features work. But for as far as intent goes, like this is how I intend to use Camtasia. Like I use Camtasia not to, because I've used Camtasia to do things like cut together like fake commercials, or you can record a YouTube video with it type of thing. Or fun fact too, like if you know what a visual novel is, you could do like visual novel animations and stuff in Camtasia, and that's something I've done as like a kinetic novel sort of thing. And you can do all sorts of cool things like that with that bundle of features, even though Premiere would probably be more suited to do that kind of thing. But like the intent with Camtasia is to use a video to teach, especially because that's how a lot of us learn stuff now, through like YouTube or Udemy or Coursera. That would be my thing. So to dodge that question, features not so much, but intent, I think.
I was just going to say, I think I just figured out an even better way to reword that as you were speaking. I'm like, yeah, I think there's actually a little bit of a better way to ask that. Is that, let's say they asked you to present some of your work and you want to literally just like wow them and knock their socks off.
Oh, yeah.
What would that look like?
I'd give them a tutorial on something complicated, but like if I would say person to person, pick something you like. And so that's how I got to learn Camtasia. It was like, I needed to teach my kids how to write argumentative essays. And, I'm an English grad, so I'm into that kind of thing. So it's like, all right, cool. I'm going to screencast myself going through and planning an essay and how to outline and doing all that stuff. And, back in the day, I didn't have the editing chops I do now. But like, if you can teach somebody something that you're passionate about with video, and use those features to like edit a good video, because really the art is in the editing. Like anyone can capture video, that's fine. But like if you're going to teach someone how to like use this formula in Excel, the editing is really what's going to separate you from the trillion other tutorials out there that already exist.
Isn't it funny too how we teach ourselves with videos all the time? Like like as we were talking about before even coming on the podcast, talking about how like if I have a problem, I just Google something. But I can very much make the argument that if I'm also trying to learn something, I just go on YouTube and I just watch video after video, and that's how I learn. And it's almost like I wish there was even a better secret or formula for telling people about how to really learn for a tool. But like I mentioned Premiere and After Effects, and like, what do you think I did? I downloaded some templates. I tried to break them and figure out how to put them back together. And then when I couldn't, I went on YouTube and I watched other people do it. And then I tried to do it.
That's the secret, I think, is, I think, because, for me, there's like a hierarchy of like learning via video. And it's like, it starts at YouTube because it's the freest. And then it moves up to like paid platforms like Udemy, which occasionally will sell all their courses for $20. And if that's completely exhausted, maybe go find an expert selling a course. But the real secret that you've hit on is you've got to have something that you're working on, or you've got to have something that you're like invested in, because the information's out there. There was a brief stint of time where I thought I was going to be a web developer. And so I wanted to learn like HTML and CSS and JavaScript. And, I learned HTML and CSS, and JavaScript scares the hell out of me. So I always stop right there. But I can't tell you how many tutorials I've started and stopped. I can't tell you how many tutorials I've paid for. But the thing that's different about that is I never had like a project I really wanted to do. Like I have a friend who went through and did the boot camp and stuff, and he is now a web developer, but he had like passion projects that he wanted to build. And so he took that opportunity to learn how to do the functions and do them. And for me, it was teaching kids how to write essays. And then that became teaching someone how to do this thing, or then it became, hey, I have a problem. How do I solve it? Well, okay, now I have another project I've got to work on. I've got to figure out the easiest way to get that knowledge from me to them. So I think that's it. Because you're right. Information is everywhere. Everyone's just dripping in information. So having that thing to like latch onto and really, and right now I'm doing that with Storyline, because I'll admit I'm the world's okayest Storyline user. And so right now I've started a video series that I've very much kind of shelved because I have like a trillion things happening in my life. But, it's me fumbling through how to create like an e-learning project. It's like, here's my thing that I want to do. I want to teach people how to play rock, paper, scissors using Storyline. But I don't know how to do that. So it's me in real time. And so my first video is like 10 minutes long. And then the next video is going to be me sourcing my information and creating like a little document. And then after that, it's like, all right, how do I design this thing? So that's how I'm going to learn Storyline, is I have a reason to, and I have a project to work on. So that's That's my long-winded way of saying if you want to learn something, have a reason to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I will even piggyback off of for that one too is that I would tell people what I'm working on. So when they ask me, it's my reminder. Like,
Oh, that's
oh
good.
yeah, you didn't forget about it, which has ended up how this podcast started. Told enough people. I shared with them the logo ahead of time. I told them what I'm going to do. And then eventually the messages started to come in of just like, hey, when's the podcast coming out? What you doing? And eventually all of the excuses went away. So it was just like, oh no, I have to do this. I have to get the website. I got to get the domain. I got to get this on
Yeah.
Apple Podcasts and figure this out. And that's what it finally was like, you're going to do the thing. So, no, that makes sense. So we're talking about YouTube, though, as someone else who also has a YouTube channel, as we've talked about that a little bit. What has your experience been like of making videos on a video platform to teach people about video editing? It's very
Oh,
meta.
yeah, it's super meta. Oh gosh, I don't even know why. Like, I don't even know why I started. Only recently have I even put my face on it. Like I've got my face plastered everywhere, like LinkedIn and my website, like here's my face. But teaching how to use a video editor on a video platform has been kind of cool. And the way that I've been tackling it is I've been trying to find the things that I like what do I search out when I look for videos? And one of I'm currently learning how to use Premiere Pro better. I can fumble through a video, but like there's a lot of like Premiere's deep. And that's the thing. I tell people, like, if you need to go beyond Camtasia, like go Premiere. But for the reason that I haven't learned Premiere is Camtasia does a lot of what I needed to do. But one of my favorite channels that I subscribe to is called Adobe in a Minute. And it's like 1 or 2 minute tutorials on like how to do this thing in Adobe Premiere, like how to do letterbox in Adobe Premiere, how to slow a clip down in Adobe Premiere, how to do XYZ in Adobe Premiere. And like all their videos are like 1, 2, 3 minutes long. And so I thought that's what I like. Every time I add a video that's longer than 10 minutes to my watch later list, I kind of dread it. Even if the content's really cool. So I'll watch it episodically. So like I'll do like 5 minutes here and another 5 minutes there. But I thought, why not just do like a features thing in Camtasia and show like a practical application in it? And like on all my thumbnails, I'll do like approximately 4 minutes, approximately 2 minutes. Because I'm sure there are people out there like me. It's like, yeah, I want to learn this thing, but I don't want to spend 20 minutes doing it. Like right now I'm making my way through a 4-hour free YouTube Premiere tutorial. And I'm about 20 minutes in, and that's taken me forever just to get through that 20 minutes. But I've got time to watch 5 minutes on how to do a cool thing. So that's Adobe in a Minute, but the Camtasia version. That's my shtick, I think.
You just reinforced an idea for me that I actually really need to follow up with is that I keep on thinking about just making instructional design shorts, like 5-minute clips of an instructional design topic and just like hit it home, and I really should do that because if you've seen any, like, I know you've seen some of mine and like they're long because they're more exploratory in nature. I'm not trying to put an hour's worth of content into your head about exactly your next steps and what you should be doing, but it's just like kind of the way of sharing. But if I was teaching somebody, I'm not going to make it an hour lecture. Like I would never do that. It would be much more condensed,
Yeah, condensed and give them time to like do other things or perform an activity. But yeah, man, if you follow through on that, as long in your minute columns, if they're single digits, I will watch every single one of them. Because once it rounds the corner on 10, it's like, all right, that's going into my watch later, and I may get to it, I may not get to it. Like I seriously have like a whole list of watch later instructional design things that are like 40 minutes long, an hour long, and they've been there for months. And I'm gonna watch them eventually, but probably not now. Because if another thing comes along that's like 5 minutes, like I'm gonna watch that first.
Yeah, you just reinforced that point. All right, coming soon, instructional design shorts by Dr. Luke Hobson. All right, great. Thanks a lot, Alex. You're giving me work.
Yeah.
Super fantastic. Okay, so so from there, though, the other thing that I really wanted to talk with you about is that you are a famous voice actor. Clearly,
shucks.
Your voice sounds fantastic, and this is obviously something else that you do. And I know a lot of instructional designers that do this. But like, I'm not sure how. I don't know where this kind of connection came into play, but I always see it on like the Facebook groups or LinkedIn groups of people asking for just voice narration help. And they're seeking 5 people who have voices that sound like, XYZ. How did you get into voice acting? Like, how does one do this?
It's a long road. Like, it's a really long road. Like, I'm still, I don't know. depending, if you want to consider voiceover a thing that you go from 0 to 100% on, 100% being, I'm done and jobs just show up at my door and I don't have to do anything ever again because work just falls in my lap. I feel like I'm at like 15%, and I've been doing this for a couple of years. And so the short answer of how one gets into it is, it's different for everybody. But for my particular path, it was, I am an actor. Like, I do stage, and I'm currently in a show now, which is why I'm not doing that YouTube series right now, is because we're putting up a show soon. But I'm a stage actor, and I have been since 2015. Like, I kind of got roped into being a stage actor, and then I fell in love with it, and that's just ever since. But I also have a background in music. So, like, when I was a young lad in late high school, early college, I had aspirations of recording indie albums and touring in uncomfortable vans and playing sweaty shows and being on indie record labels and stuff. And, being that person, but also being like really driven, you realize that either, and you also have bandmates that aren't going to shell out the money. You got to learn to like record stuff, because that's how you get people to listen to your music, especially in the days of MySpace. So I learned how to do all that stuff. Like, I learned how to record and learn how to use audio workstations and such. And so those two things kind of ran parallel. Like, I kept putting out music that really didn't do much because I'm a bad self-promoter. And I ended up continuing being on stage and being in shows and musicals and stuff. And so eventually someone went, "Why don't you just voice act?" I went, "What do you mean?" It's like, "Well, you can be a voice actor. It's you have microphones and you act. Just put those two things together." And I went, "Yeah, but I don't live in LA. I don't live in Texas, so it's not like I'm gonna get like anime dubs. I don't live in Chicago, so like that's where a lot of commercials happen." They're like, "No, dude, you can. Have you heard of this thing called the internet? You can do it from anywhere." Like, granted, you may not be in a major blockbuster Hollywood thing if you don't live in LA, but voice actors like voice act from wherever they are. I was like, "All right, let's give this a shot." And that's what started the journey, and it eventually led to a lot of recording for free, which is bad. But as a new person, you got to cut your teeth somehow, to getting on platforms with predatory business practices. But it also gave me a lot of practice, going back to that whole have a reason. I learned that like standards for voiceover are really high. You think you know how to record things until you get into voiceover. And then, so yeah, it was a long slosh of learning how to do it right, and a long slosh of doing it wrong until I figured out how to do it right. And then once you started doing it right and getting people to coach you to do it right, and then you start landing jobs, and then those jobs kind of beget more jobs, because it's like, "Oh, you did this thing, so we know that you know how to do this. You can work on our thing." And then those two things, and then just sort of snowballs up. And that's kind of where I'm at now.
That's awesome. And that makes so much sense. The fact that you're also an actor, like, talk about the stars aligning. That just makes 100%.
For real.
Right, it really does. That's incredible. So did you, with all the expertise that you have and all that experience, did you have to get over the whole hurdle of the weird first time that you heard your voice and you're like, "Oh, that's what I sound like"? Do you encounter that?
Yeah. It's funny too, because like, most like commercial voiceover work are just normal people with their normal voices. And so like you hear your own voice and it's such a unique thing to you. But when other people hear it, you're just another dude or another lady type of thing. And but yeah, like after a while, like initially it's like, "Oh, that's what I sound like, huh?" Nobody's ever gonna want to pay me to talk on their thing because this sounds like garbage. And by this I mean my own voice. But yeah, no, after enough time of like recording and then like engineering your own auditions and then sending them off and listening back to them, it just becomes like a thing. Because you know how like in your head you sound different than you sound on like a tape, like you listen to yourself like, "Oh, that's my voice." That kind of goes away after listening. So like now the voice in my head pretty accurately reflects how I actually sound in like headphones. But I think just because I've had enough time to bridge that gap. So the short of it is, yeah, it's everyone goes through that phase but it's basically just immersion therapy where you listen to yourself enough and you go, "Oh, okay, that's what I sound like."
Pretty much. That's what I felt with everything for the podcast too. For the first episode, I was like, "Wow, that's really strange." And then afterwards, like, okay. But fun fact, I had to re-record the first 5 episodes of the podcast because it just didn't sound like me.
Oh
And
no.
I was overdoing it. That was the thing. I was like trying to overcompensate for the fact that it's this like, oh, you're brand new to this podcast world. You don't know what you're doing. So you got to really come in here and try to just wow people with the first couple episodes. And then eventually I'm listening to it and I was like, yeah, that's not my style in any way, shape, or form. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to try to do it my way and see what happens. And now, as you said, it's just a normal thing to hear
Yeah.
myself or see myself on YouTube, like whatever it is. Now I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. But the first time, yeah, it was super strange. I
Yeah.
Yeah, it was by all means, it was absolutely weird. Did you have that same feeling though when you actually heard yourself on something incredibly popular that all of your friends, I'm sure, messaged you, like on Netflix? You're actually
Oh,
on.
yeah.
How'd that go?
Okay, that's a good question. Yeah, so when I heard myself on Netflix, on the Netflix YouTube channel, like I'm not on, the
It's still
repository.
Netflix, man.
That's
Come
true.
on.
That's true.
Hey, yeah,
Okay.
come on.
All right, I'll stop downplaying it. So, the first time I heard that was really strange just because it was like I don't know, it was such a nice because it's a video production company that does stuff for Netflix, but if you do stuff for Netflix, you have to be of like high caliber, right? Like Netflix doesn't just go on like Upwork and go like, "Oh, I'm going to hire this video editor to do this thing for my channel that has millions of subscribers on it." And so hearing it in context with like music and clips of the things that it pertains to was sort of surreal because up to that point I had done paid work and I had done like one really interesting commercial thing that I'm not necessarily proud of, just because like the company is sort of has some conflict around it. Is like a tech company in China type of thing,
Ah,
and Huawei is the name of the company, by the way, if anyone wants to look it up. But it was like one of the first things where I was like, "Holy moly! Like that's me doing a thing for stuff that people actually watch." Like I remember like I got hired at the college and that was sort of the thing is one of the IT guys is like, "Oh, you do voiceover work, huh?" I'm like, "Yeah, I do voiceover work." He's like, "Do you do anything that I would have seen you in?" I'm like, "Probably not." And that's usually the answer for most voice actors. Like, no, I don't. He's like, "Oh, well, I thought like it'd be really interesting if you're like I was the voice of Pikachu or something." And I'm like, that's not the standard thing that voice actors do, but like this was that was one of the first things, like that first Netflix bit that was like, oh wow, like because then when people are like, oh, have you done anything that I would hear you, and I'm like, oh, that show Away on Netflix? They're like, yeah, I know that show. I'm like, yeah, I did some promotional materials for that show, and that's the first time that I'm like, yeah, I can say that, like I can say that I'm in a thing, an official thing about stuff that people watch. I was like, that's cool. So that was really surreal.
yeah, that's absolutely incredible. Because I know when I saw your LinkedIn post and you mentioned that and you shared that clip, I was just like, hey, I think he made it. Like everything else you've already done has already been fantastic, but to be able to put that in your resume, that's not a small feat. Not like everyone can say that. So
That was cool.
yeah, it's really cool. So you have perfected your way to now getting on to Netflix. So walk it back for me a second. If someone is new and has aspirations of someday they want to do this as well, how do they practice their skill set? What would you recommend for tips or building up their confidence or routine or anything of the sort?
There's a lot of ways to go. The way that worked for me is acting. I mean, and most established voice actors will tell you like learn to act because it's because a lot of people like think it's just reading, and anyone can read. And most people think it's like, oh, I do funny voices. It's like, yeah, but if you go like listen to commercials and stuff, like how many of those voices are funny voices? Most of them are just normal voices. So if I had to give someone a advice is learn to act, like jump into community theater, go take some acting classes, go do some online acting classes. There's all sorts of like Zoom workshop acting classes for beginners and stuff. So like if you're going to get in, that would be the way to go. And just depends on what type of stuff you want to do. Like if you want to go do like animation and video games, there are classes tailored to that. Stage acting is really good for that because you got to be real big in a stage. If you want to do commercial voiceover work, that probably requires some more specific coaching just because it's really hard to remain conversational in front of a microphone alone in a booth or like under a blanket type of thing. And so like when you go to read for commercials and you're brand new, and like if I went and dug up some old like auditions or something, it would be real big and it would sound a lot like this. And people don't talk like that. And commercials aren't recorded like that. So like next time like a HelloFresh commercial comes up, or I don't know, pick your favorite brand and go find their commercial. Like pick a beer commercial and go like, hey, this is beer. We drink beer. We want you to drink beer. Bud Light. That's pretty much how commercials are. And getting out of your own head and just being like having a conversation like you and I are having right now is so hard to do by yourself. So yeah, there are places to go. Acting is my number one choice. Go learn to act first, because even if you don't care about, work boots, if you get booked for a work boots job, you gotta love work boots. Oh man, these boots are the best boots I have ever bought. Or if a little more of a subtle feel, like, oh dude, these boots saved my toes. Like I dropped 6,000 pounds on this work boot, and miraculously no toes were broken. And being able to convincingly say that to a microphone without another person on the end of it, hard, so hard. So that's
Hey,
what
you already
acting first,
sold.
coaching second.
You already sold me, man. Gonna go out and
Nice.
buy some new work boots. So
Yes.
there we go. Well, I have to ask you, Alex, because it's going to come up, and if I don't ask it, I know that you are just going to get bombarded with questions. Can you
Okay.
please describe for us your setup? What's the mic? What
Oh,
do you use? What's affordable? Just give us a breakdown of your rig, because I know people are going to want to know.
all right, cool. And this is time to get on my soapbox real quick, because of all the things you can buy, and people do get lost in gear. Like people go spend ridiculous amounts of money on gear that just sound okay, because you need a good space in which to record. Like your microphone's really good at picking up sounds. Your microphone is better than the human ear at picking up sounds and recording it and translating it into some sort of digital signal. But if you don't have like a good treated space, it's going to sound gross. Probably what my microphone sounds like here right now, because it's got like hard walls and stuff, and you hear echoes. And when you clap, you can hear all that like gross. And commercials aren't recorded like that, or cartoons aren't recorded like that. They have like whole rooms where the walls are soft. There's like carpet and foam and acoustic panels and stuff. And so that's number one. So my most important piece of gear, which the listeners at home can't see directly behind me, is a vocal booth that you can either buy for lots of money or construct for a lot less money. And basically, it's just a room within a room. And on the inside, it's a lot of squishy things. So that way, it will absorb all the reflections and echoes of the room. And so your voice just hits the microphone, and that's all the microphone gets. If you're going to get into voice acting, start off small. Like if you're learning, start small. Don't go out and spend a bunch of money on, gear, because a lot of people say, I'm going to get into voice acting. I'm going to buy this $1,000 microphone. And then a couple months later, they're like, I can't do the voice acting thing because I didn't think about all the marketing you have to do. And I didn't think about all the auditions you got to do. And I didn't think about how much time it was actually going to take. And then they sell that $1,000 microphone at a $500 loss. So start off with a middle of the road microphone. Like you can be competitive if you have a good treated space for a $300 to $500 microphone. You can totally do that. People get away with it for less because their acting is really good. But I do have a very high-end microphone. I have the Neumann TLM 103, which cost about $1,200 because I needed it. So like when things went remote, lots of studios want you to have the industry standard microphones. And so I went and bought the industry standard microphone. And sure enough, on auditions, they're like, what microphone are you using? Are you using the 103? Using the 416? What are you using? And so that was one of them. However, there is a $500 microphone that I own that I like better than that. But, and also too, it depends on your voice. Try out some microphones if you can, get them used. But for me, I have the 103 in my booth. It's rather expensive, but you don't need a $1,200 microphone. I needed it personally, but if you're starting out, you don't need a $1,200 microphone. And last but not least, I use the SSL2 Plus as my audio interface. Most people use those little red boxes called the Scarlett Solos or the Scarlett Focusrite things. Those are pretty good. The SSL2 is a step up from that. The Scarlett ones will run you about $100, $200. The SSL2 in the $200, $250, $300 range. And after that, your next step up in noticeable quality is going to be $1,000. So don't spend any more than $300 on an interface. Don't spend any less than $100 on an interface because converting that signal is important. So recap, good vocal booth, TLM 103, SSL2 Plus, and Sennheiser HD 280s for my headphones.
Fantastic. I just learned something new. Awesome. I will be sure to put all of those links in the show notes below, by the way, folks. So you don't need
cool.
Google all those things at once to try to figure them out. Well, Alex, the final question that I have for you, which you've touched upon a little bit, but just to really hit everything home, someone is dedicated, they have the equipment, they really want to go down this road. Where can they find opportunities? I've seen them posted on Facebook in a bit, and obviously we know about Fiverr, Upwork, and all the other different things. But is that where you go, or what? Where do you find the opportunities?
That's a good question. I'll say a couple of things. Fiverr and Upwork are great places to get started, but they're not great places that you want to stay. Just because people are looking for something quick and cheap, and you're basically short order cooking your voiceover. If you want opportunities, it sort of depends on the types of opportunities you want. Because in voiceover, you have a couple of different arms. If you want to do like character and animation work, if you really want to go big time, you've got to live close to where the big stuff happens. Like, for example, I'm never going to go big time animation work. Not to say that it can't happen remotely, but odds are, when people hopefully get vaccinated or, when things go back to some semblance of normalcy, studios are going to open back up and LA is still going to be a media machine. If you want to do anime dubbing, you're probably going to want to move to Texas. But, there are all sorts of like indie game developers out there or independent animators. And, media is not just television anymore. So like if you're going to do that type of stuff, getting in a community of those people helps. And I find that Twitter is the most prevalent place to find opportunities for like indie animation or indie video games. And you can use those things under your tool belt to then kind of broker yourself into an agency that will give you big stuff, even if you live remotely. Like the lady who cut my demo, and she is very near and dear to my heart, named Melissa Medina, is signed to an agency that is primarily based in LA, but she's like in Minnesota, or she was. I think she just moved. But she remote records like video games and animations, and she dubs for like shows on Netflix that were once in a different language but are now in English from her home. So, the thing is that it is going more remote. But if you're looking to like land a Disney flick, you got to live in LA. But that's not to say that you couldn't make a fantastic living as a voice actor from wherever you are. So that was a long bit of exposition to answer this question. Twitter's a great place to start. Find some Discord servers or some Facebook groups that you can go talk to other voice actors about, because we support each other. Like if there's a role or an audition that like maybe I'm not good for, I will gladly pass it along to someone I know who would be good for it. So find those communities online. Twitter's a great place. Twitter. If you're doing commercial work, that's kind of a different beast. There is this concept called pay-to-play sites. And there are two sites that are very prevalent, voices.com and voice123. Yeah. And you have to pay a yearly membership to get access to auditions for some rather large things. There's a little bit of, conflict around those in the voice acting community, but it's sort of a necessary evil. They're basically like an automated agent, because the way an agent works is they sign you, they send you auditions. If you book something, they take 20%. These websites do the same thing. They give you access to oodles of auditions for commercial stuff. That's where I got my Netflix thing. But they take a yearly subscription fee from you, and they will also take a percentage of the job you book, which is kind of icky to think about. But if you're a voice actor looking to build a body of work, that is the place you go to do it, because agencies won't book you unless you are bookable. And how do you book things if you don't have the opportunity to book? These pay-to-play sites are sort of the halfway point. And that's how I've gotten assigned onto my agencies, who send me auditions for big things. Like I recently auditioned for like a video game that's like a AAA video game that's being like, translated to English type of thing. I got my Netflix thing through Voices. I've gotten like IBM work through Voices, a couple of like mobile games through voices.com. A lot of those big like resume shining stars to get me into those like the next level agencies happen through those pay to play sites. However, for those listening at home, make sure you're ready, because they will gladly take your $500 for the year, whether you're ready or not. So like if you've got a bad space, if your acting isn't quite good enough, you paid $500 to join something that you're not ready for. So be aware, talk to other voice actors. So the first place I'd go, join a community of other voice actors and let them tell you that you're either ready to go or that you suck and you need to go shore up this thing.
Oh, I love it. Well, thank you, Alex, for coming on. This has been awesome. I learned plenty. I'm sure all the folks at home are going to be, taking down and scribbling notes and going through everything. So we got a lot out of this episode. So where, Alex, can folks go to learn more about you and your channels and everything else that you do?
Oh yeah. Let's see. I'm very active on LinkedIn, fairly active on YouTube, but like to get to those places, you can go to mittstech.com, mittstech.com. That's where all my like instructional design, multimedia things live. Or if you're wanting to go learn more about like what I do for voiceover, it's just alexmittsvo.com.
Wonderful. Well, hey, man, thanks so much for coming on the show again. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, dude. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Alex, for once again coming on the show. It was so insightful, and I know that I learned quite a bit. I had zero clue about any of those websites that Alex mentioned, so it's really interesting to hear about where you can go for voice acting work, and even the groups on Facebook, Twitter, Discord, and a few other things as well, too. Had no idea about the community behind this, but that also does make a lot of sense with what we know about the instructional design community. Be sure to check out all of Alex's links that are down below in the show notes too, with his website, LinkedIn, his YouTube channel, and everything else that he mentioned. I also want to give a special thank you to you, the listeners at home, who have purchased the new ebook and have been sharing pictures online of the cover art, your favorite chapters, and everything else. For all of you who are still waiting on the physical copies of the book, I am working on it. It's taking longer than I thought, but it's okay. I want to make sure that it's done right. So hopefully by the next podcast episode, it's going to be ready. Either way, you can stay up to date with my notifications by signing up for the email list over at drlukehobson.com or by joining our Facebook group called Instructional Design Institute Community. You can also find the ebook at theinstructionaldesignbook.com. Last but not least, folks, give this podcast a 5-star rating wherever you are listening. Those ratings really do help out. If you've noticed lately that our podcast, when you search instructional design in Apple, it keeps on popping up as one of the top recommendations, which is awesome. And it's all because of you and you rating the show and sharing it with other people. So thank you so much for being a listener of the show and for doing all of those things. As always, folks, stay nerdy out there. I'll talk to you next time.